Okay, so I'm gonna begin with an introduction here, and I'll keep my eye on the waiting room, on the lobby, and let people in as they arrive. Um, so this is good. No messages that nobody can get in. Everyone's trickling in. Looks good so far. So housekeeping, right off the hop, I'll explain to people that you're more than welcome to turn your cameras on. It shouldn't be a bandwidth issue. If it is, I'll just ask you to turn your cameras off. But this gives somebody, Wendy, somebody to speak to other than me. But I would like you to keep your microphones off. We will go into breakout rooms a little bit later. If you've never done breakout rooms on Zoom, they're fantastic. We'll dump you into small rooms, and although the webinar is being recorded, what happens in breakout rooms is not recorded. So feel free to share your war stories and brainstorm with your peers. On that note, I will be doing a poll, a survey near the end of the presentation, and that is all anonymous. So don't sweat that either. They're really rolling in here. So we've gone over mics, we've gone over cameras. Again, when you go into the breakout room, please turn your camera on if you can. And we get it. This is a lunchtime workshop. You're more than welcome to eat and drink coffee and just maybe have your mic off while you're doing it. So what's happening here? Well, this is our second interactive workshop. My goodness, the lobby's going bananas here. This is our second interactive workshop in a series of 8. The first one has been posted on the Community Futures YouTube channel. This is number 2, and we'll be doing 8 between now and April. I'm Mike. I'll introduce myself. My name is Mike. I work for Community Futures. I'll be your host. I'm really just the Wizard of Oz behind the screens, allowing people into the lobby, as you can tell. For each one of these, so far, we have a different presenter. Today is Wendy. How do I pronounce your last name, Wendy?
It's Jeffrey.
Jeffrey.
Yep.
I was going to guess that, really. We've been through this before. So I owned a small business, so I understand much of what many of you are going through. And what's happening here is Community Futures has been around the Medicine Hat Brooks Tabor corridor, this office, running that area for 30 years. And they've been providing training, mentorship, and lending to small business and incubation for small business, if you will. We're provided with various levels of government funding. And the purpose of this is, you may recall, I'm speaking quickly because I really want to give the time to Wendy. You may recall a couple of years back, we began in this region with the Brood survey. And so many of you participated in the Brood survey and gave us fantastic feedback on what the community needed from a business perspective. And one of the things that came out of it was this workshop series. So we're hiring people like Wendy to present to us on topics that are important and timely to our businesses. These are all HR related. Today's is on managing remote employees, which has become, as most of you know, a huge deal, and it doesn't look like it's going to go away anytime soon. This looks like a rather sticky issue, and it's not all bad. We'll talk about some of the ways, I'm sure, in our breakout rooms that it's good, but it's challenging. And so Wendy's going to help us today. So the purpose of the workshops is to take the feedback we got from you folks in the Brood survey and bring in consultants that can build capacity in your business, assuming you don't have the budget to hire Wendy, as I wouldn't have, or that you don't have a CPHR in-house. So where are we now? So I've been doing this with the assistance of an advisory committee. I see Brittany's here today. Hello, Brittany. Thank you for coming. Brittany's on my advisory committee. So they help me select the topics for you. And then we go and we hire wonderful people like Wendy. So COVID-19's tipped all of us on our ear. Everything is confusing and uncertain, and managing remote employees is a huge issue for many of us. So I'm excited about this one. Today, we've got Wendy. Wendy's got over 30 years of experience in HR consulting, everything from oil and gas to retail, big to small. She's a CPHR, she's a benefit specialist, and she studied organizational and executive coaching at NYU. So I'm excited to pick Wendy's brain today. And on that note, I'm going to turn it over to her. I'm going to turn my mic and camera off because I'm going to be typing frantically in the background, and that will be annoying. And oh, the last thing is the chat. You're more than welcome to throw questions into the chat. I'm going to request that Wendy doesn't look at the chat. I will manage that for her.
Okay.
And I'll just let you focus on what you want to do, what you need to do. And then if there are pertinent questions, I'll bring them up. I may interrupt you, but I'll probably just let you push through, and then we'll deal with them in the end.
Sure.
Okay, so
Perfect.
after all of that, thank you, Wendy. Sorry for
Thank you,
chewing
Michael.
up 7 minutes. I'm pushing off and handing it over to you.
Perfect. So thanks everybody for joining today. As Michael said, my name is Wendy Giuffre. I am the president and senior consultant for Wendy Ellen Inc. It's an HR consulting firm. We operate out of Calgary, Red Deer, Edmonton. And over our almost 16 years in business, we have consulted to probably around 180 to 190 Alberta-based small to mid-sized businesses. So that's our niche. It's not a specific industry. As Michael said, we've consulted to, I actually can't think of an industry that we haven't. So, but it's really the size of the business, anywhere from usually around 5 employees up to just over 100, where they typically then, an HR type person would be on full time with that company, but we may act as a senior advisory resource for them. So that's really what we do. As Michael said, I've got over 30 years in HR in various roles in consulting, employee-based, big companies, started out oil and gas, one of the big large companies, and then ventured out into this marketplace, like I said, 16 years ago. So today's session on managing remote workers, this is a big thing for people. I don't have all the answers to this. I have ideas. So what I'm really hoping this session gives you is some food for thought, some new ideas that'll come a lot out of the breakout sessions. I think I encourage everybody to share and with their successes, their challenges, that sort of thing. And we'll also be asking to, after those breakout sessions, if you want to share some of those. So maybe you'll want somebody to sort of keep a tally, or if somebody has a really good news story or a real challenge, we can discuss that. I'm hoping you get a few new ideas out of today as well. And just remember that really we're all in the same boat. This is, for a lot of companies, uncharted territory. There are some companies that have home-based employees and always have had and will continue to have. But for people that this is a new experience, both from the employee side and from the employer's side, we're just trying to muddle our way through and find the best way forward. So like I said, I really don't think there's a right answer to this. All I'm going to give you today is some things to think about and some things to look at within your own organization. So what we're really going to cover today is expectation setting, the importance of it, and sort of the process. And this isn't something that should only be done with a remote workforce, for sure. This is expectation setting should be done sitting across the desk from somebody. But in this world we're in right now, where there is a lot of remote work, super important. I want to talk a bit about culture. So your status quo culture versus your evolving culture. And I would probably challenge anybody that's gone from a in-office environment to a remote workforce to say that their culture has remained the same. I personally don't think that's possible. So we'll talk about that, Communication, once again, not only important in a remote workforce, but communication is important anytime. In this situation, super important, and more so than ever. Follow up, part and parcel with communication, but it's really speaks to the two-way piece to the communication. It's not just communicating outward to your remote workers, it's hearing their piece from their end as well. And then there's just a little bit around monitoring employees versus trusting employees. And there's companies that swing the pendulum one way, or far to one way and far to the other. And, I think there's got to be a happy medium in there, probably more leaning towards the trusting employees. And we can talk about that. This is where your probably disciplinary issues and your maybe not so high performing employees, that's really where it will show. And then red flags, what to look for to see that you're maybe have an indication your remote workforce may be struggling. So I want to start off with this, just a few recent stats that actually I just read this past week in the Canadian HR Reporter. So TELUS International did a big study, and they found that 51% of American workers, it always kind of bugs me when they use American stats, but sorry, that's what I am. American workers felt less connected working from home. 57% of those workers were missing the small talk and interactions. 53% of those workers were missing the natural collaboration that happens when you're sitting in an office space with your fellow colleagues. And this is a big one, I think. 50% miss the separation between home and work. I've had a home office for the last 20-some years. And it's an office. I can shut my door. I'm pretty good at that line, but even so, I always know that work is there. And so with people now that may not have an office, they're working off their kitchen table, or I've heard some horror stories, even smaller tables, that work is always staring them in the face. And so there's a difficulty for people making that separation between home and work. A company called M-Train, an HR training company, one of their big stats was the trust in leaders fell by 12%. And 77% of all of their workers felt the culture would never be the same. So, and here's just, one quick reason. Zoom meetings start, you have the business discussion, everybody hits the big red button to leave the meeting. I've just recently done some surveys with some of my own clients, and I have found the same. I even had one, woman in tears, basically because that was her social life, getting out to work, and she feels totally disconnected at home by herself. So I think there is going to be a real struggle, and going to continue to be. So we really need to work on how we keep these people engaged. So, like I said, expectation setting, it's nothing new. We've talked about this since I started in HR 30-some years ago. It's important to have expectations for the role, for, annually, what's your corporate expectations, those kinds of things. But I think even now they go a bit further. So expectations around what are your work hours, or what are your expectation for work hours when someone is working from home? If it's a timesheet-based business, those are typically a little bit easier, log in, log out. But for others, how do you expect them to, or do you expect them to keep track of their time? You could really go down that road of having people submit at the end of the week, sort of where they spent their time. That maybe should be something that's done always in a workplace, but it's really how do you track, or how does the employee track that they're putting their hours in? Some employers are finding that a real challenge and really are wanting to see that time tracking. Response to email. What is your expectations around how quickly you expect a response to email? I've had a lot of conversations with some of my clients saying that, my employees are home, they're supposed to be working, I email them, but I don't get a response for a few hours later or even to the next day. So what are those expectations? Are they different than what they were when you were in the physical office setting? And I think right now people are expecting that they will be quicker because theoretically you're sitting at your computer. segues into the next point, availability. What are the parameters? Do you expect people to be available, have their phones with them, even if they're throwing laundry in or whatever, which is what people are going to do when they're working from home, going for a walk, that sort of thing. So what is the expectation of availability? I work with one group that they use a Teams environment. And so if you're unavailable, you mark that button in the Teams so people know that. But there is that expectation, which you have to set at the beginning. What are those work hours? And, I think there's probably not a lot of people in the remote workforce right now that can't say maybe they've skipped off to Costco for an hour when it's not busy during the week, where they wouldn't have done that working at the office. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that if the work's getting done. But once again, it really, the availability and how you show that as far as your own availability should be talked about. Communication policy and the systems, we'll get into that further, but really what communication systems are you going to use? What kind of parameters are you going to set around those? How often do people check in? Those kinds of things. Key projects and deadlines. We have status meetings on projects when we're in the office, but it's also easier to walk down the hall or to the next office and say, where are you with this? I need to work on the next piece, just wondering where you are with that. So that just checking in at the office next door has been lost. So how do we keep in contact on key projects and deadlines? And scheduled meetings. Meetings are really a thorn in a lot of people's sides. In the office, some people think they have way too many meetings, and they probably do. Studies have shown there's way too many meetings. Meetings go on too long. However, I think in this situation, there may be a necessity to have more meetings because we've lost that just walking down the hall to check on what's going on. But you really have to keep track of, keep those on an agenda, only invite those that are really needed. We don't want people sitting, which I know happened at the beginning, in Zoom meetings for their entire day either. Goal setting, it's an integral part of expectation setting, of course. No different long-term, short-term goals. But I think it's, as I said in the previous slide, more important to establish regular check-ins. I know a lot of people that have morning, they would call them stand-up meetings. Everybody grabbed their coffee. If they happen to have that sort of facility that had stand-up tables, it worked really well. Didn't get people too comfortable, so the meetings didn't have to go on that long, but just regular check-ins. Those kinds of things can also happen in a remote workforce. Just have a 5-minute meeting or a 10-minute meeting. Everybody grab their coffee. How are things going this morning? What's going on today? Here's the priorities, but make it quick. And once again, it should be team-based. Ensure that you have that reporting back and forth of where people are on their work progress. So, I've had people that have totally lost track of projects because you just think someone's off doing it, and they may think you're off doing another piece to it. And because you're not physically together, it falls between the cracks, or something does. And make sure that you allow your staff and your team identify roadblocks, and make sure that those roadblocks are identified early. Some of them may simply be a fact that you're not working side by side. So figure those ones out, and maybe there is an opportunity to bring people together if that's a necessity. So, but those roadblocks need to be identified at the beginning and upfront as soon as they're addressed. As I said, establish a daily reporting process. These can be as complicated or as simple as need be. Through emails, through Gantt charting, through whatever sort of Excel spreadsheet you want to use, even just as simple as a Teams chat or a text. But it could simply be like I put in quotes there, I've completed X and I have Y left to do until reaching goal Z. Or today I'm planning this, tomorrow I'm planning that. And I don't want it to be just inundating everybody with information, but I really think, especially as a leader, you have to make sure that you've got your group on task and that everybody has an idea of where everybody is on some of those key goals. The next topic this could be and has been many webinars, seminars, conferences on their own: culture. Culture is a big one. I think that word's a little bit overused, but really, when we talk about culture within my firm, we really say when we walk into a new client, we can feel that culture right when we walk in. Whether it's you hear some people chit-chatting, or there's laughter, or it's just a welcoming environment. The office space is welcoming. The kitchen area or coffee area is inviting. People are smiling, as opposed to going into a client where nobody's talking, everybody's just staring at their screen, there's no noise, and where people are sitting there in their winter jackets because it's too cold. So I think culture has a real feel, and sometimes it is really hard to put in words. But many companies, they're famous for their culture. Some of them, like Google, Netflix, Cisco, HubSpot, Salesforce, those are some of the companies that are known for their great culture. And anybody that's worked for those companies, that's kind of their benchmark, and they remember that for their career. Lots of things make those places a good place. Part of it too is lots of money, first of all, where small business may not obviously have the same kind of funds to invest in a culture, to make it sort of something that they look for it when they look at the Google, Netflix, those kind of cultures. But there are ways definitely to make your culture one that people want to remain working for your company. So the overall vibe and culture can really make or break your employee experience. And it can literally take somebody who would otherwise be a very productive member to becoming unproductive, or teams. And what we have to be careful through this remote workforce is that we maintain some sort of culture. I think it's going to change, but we need to maintain a culture where people are still engaged. So no different when we talk about those companies, we walk in, the culture feels great, where you go and have lunch with someone, or you hear people chatting while they're getting their coffee, talking about, sorry about that, tried to keep my dogs quiet, where they talk about, their favorite Netflix show, or what they did on the weekend, their hike they did. We need to somehow replace that in the digital space. So that you see these all the time online, these virtual happy hours, those kinds of things. So we need to try and get your team comfortable with socializing in more of a digital world. And whatever that looks like and what fits within your current culture is something that you need to try and replicate in a digital space. And it's not easy to do. And some people think it's a waste of time, but I think the more and more you try and come up with some good ideas, which we'll talk about later, we'll maintain a culture, maybe different than what you had, but we'll maintain a culture. And a big part of that is asking your team for input, consistently asking your team for input, what they'd like to do. Is there, do they want to have sort of info sessions where people do talk about what they did on the weekend, that sort of thing, and maybe even rotate those responsibilities to try and get everybody involved and try and get people invested in some of this online culture space. So like I just said, you could create Zoom meetings or call, whatever, if people are sick of video Zoom meetings, just to share weekend activities. Or, someone is responsible this week for giving a great tip on a hike, or a great restaurant, or a great takeout on Skip, anything like that, to try and keep that casual conversation and relationship going. Organize virtual happy hours, like I said, if it's appropriate for your company's culture. It's not for everybody. So I also kind of put in brackets there 11Zs for coffee. And I get that from my British father-in-law, that without fail, he had his 11Zs, and that was his coffee. And it just happened to be instant coffee for him because that's what he liked. But, or, tea at 3 o'clock, those kinds of things. Try and organize something that maybe is a bit habitual, so that people can set aside 5, 10, 15 minutes. And I'm really not trying to tell you to have people waste time, but this is the kind of stuff that would happen naturally with a good team, with a good culture, if you're in the same space. Some other activities, there's some great websites, teambuilding.com, greenhatpeople.com, and they actually have virtual escape rooms. and Thriver.com. Those are just three I threw out there. There's a lot more that have some of these ideas. So for example, a virtual book club. That's a great idea. It could be business books if that's your culture, or fictional books. Scavenger hunts, online scavenger hunts, virtual birthday celebrations, where you actually could send, let's say, an edible arrangement to that person's house, and everybody can click on at a certain time and celebrate. Kind of reminds me of I think it's the old Seinfeld episode where they celebrated every day. That's not what I'm suggesting, but just make sure that you do celebrate. Word games. I heard this one's kind of interesting, a tiny campfire where everybody made s'mores over a candle, like just things like that. And of course, you're going to get people that don't participate, no different than you get people that don't participate when you're in the same office. But hopefully you can get people if you've got ideas that people bring to the table themselves. So your team is starting to thrive or is thriving when they interact easily with each other on social calls. They come up with games or activities, and the group chatter becomes a healthy mix of work talk, sharing YouTube links, memes, photos, that kind of thing. So once again, it's really encourage your team members to speak up. So what I'm going to ask now is, Michael, if you can put people in breakout rooms, and I'd just like you to discuss from your experience how you think your culture has changed or will continue to change with a remote workforce, positive, negative, and sort of what are your indicators of that? And if you can, if you guys want to share some of that after we get back, one or two sort of thoughts on that, I think that would be great so that everybody could benefit from some of that chatter.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the main room. I'm going to turn this back to Wendy in a moment here and allow Wendy to determine how she wants to manage the time. There were some great conversations I bounced from room to room. I guess that's to be expected given the fact that you're all here and you're all caring managers. So it's great to have that opportunity to brainstorm with each other. I think the breakout rooms are in and of themselves an example of how we can use technology to do exactly what Wendy was just talking about. I think almost everyone's back now. So Wendy, are you back or are you still in your room? I think she's still in the room. Okay. What I'll do is, well, there you are.
Yeah.
I'll maybe, I don't know how time is looking for you, Wendy, but I'll leave it to you. If you want to have maybe one person from each breakout room, there were 5, quickly talk about, we'll call it 4. There was a technical glitch on the one, so I pushed people into other rooms. Maybe have one person voluntold to just talk about what they came up with. This is the real meat and potatoes of these workshops, the fact that they're interactive and we get to share ideas. So I'll drop off here and let you manage that.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. So I was in a breakout room. I can talk quickly about our breakout room. One group is back at the office now. So they were off for 2 to 3 months and did miss that social connection. They're all back working. Another individual was really talking about some of the nuts and bolts around this change in workforce and people's thoughts around employee base versus contract base, and from a technical and a more concrete side, what happens to WCB liability, OH&S, and all that stuff. And then the other person in our group too is still remote, and like they said, they all miss that office environment. So I don't know, Michael, I don't know how you broke the rooms up, but I'll just open it up to if somebody wants to talk about what went on in their room or anything significant, a good story, success, or whatever. Please feel free. We'll allow a few minutes for that.
I can chat for our group.
Perfect. Thanks, Corinne.
We had a mix. So we had some that were fully back to work, some that were still back and forth, and some that were still totally at home. So there was a few comments about, for those ones that were maybe remotely working then back at work, they found that there's a lot more openness and understanding to working differently and being flexible, and that, you know what, it might be okay if that person works from home for the day, or is it okay that that person's not doing that task in the office? I think a couple of us thought that general feeling that it was less judgment and a little bit more open to thinking and working differently were really positive. And then one was, you know, some were at home, some departments were at the office, but other departments might have been working rotating schedules. So, you know, that group really are starting to feel disconnect between their departments, losing some of that feel of family that you get when you work. So, you know, they were struggling a little bit with rotating schedules and this group, who's here, who's not. And then the last one was kind of, you know, really so much technology is involved, and, you know, working at home, and there's so much pressure to just always be responding and always being on, and drawing those lines as to work time, home time, and making those decisions. So I hope I got that for the group, but we were really awesome group.
Perfect. Thank you. Somebody else?
They were awesome.
This is Sean here. I can speak for our group.
Thanks, Sean.
I think there's a bit of a mix in our group as well, from a couple of people were remote workers and a couple were managers. I think the two biggest things that come out of it, from my perspective, was that managers, the ones that were on the line, were used to, as what I call managing by coffee, walking around, chatting, and just how managing virtually or remotely has changed the style of how we manage, and it's just something as managers we have to get used to. And the second one was, this was a bit of an anecdote from my office, but it seemed to be shared, is that there's a real alignment based on generations and how they accept remote working. And so the older generations would rather be in the office. They definitely want to be in the office. The younger generations are more apt to want usually a mix. They want a couple of days in the office and a couple of days out of the office, but they're more open or desire to work from home more.
Thanks, Sean. I think we should have one more group. Is there anybody wanting to speak from that group?
I can go ahead. It's Paula.
Thanks, Paula.
There were two of us in the room that were speaking, and then there was at one point, I think, 6 others who appeared to be not able to speak. Yeah, so the two of us carried on a conversation thinking, well, the others are observing this. Perhaps they'll make some notes of what we've experienced. But oversimplifying it, a couple things that the two of us noted, and the others might want to chip in with their thoughts on what they heard, was around just increased flexibility. And even when it's, you know, where we hold meetings, just double checking, do we have proper social distancing, and is that facility appropriate for the meeting? And really an openness to consider alternatives. And then the other comment that seemed to resonate was around, you know, a number of people when we first were moving to working remotely from being in an office space or a building, there was lots of enthusiasm, also lots of skepticism, and, you know, a bit of fighting against the working from home when this first started. And now that we're starting to move back into offices and buildings, there's the same thing happening. Sometimes it's the same people, sometimes it's different people. So very interesting. Culture shift from, you know, accustomed to being in a building and all the things that go with that, and being with their colleagues, to the shift, yet to be defined, I think, of what will happen to the culture as people come back into it, into their buildings and into meeting rooms, etc.
Yeah, that's a whole other piece too, right? With and what protocols are in place and how many people will be 100% observant of those, and not that they would do it on purpose, but just if people are so used to walking up to a cubicle or an office, and that's going to be a bit of a challenge. And we have clients facing that now, So it is quite interesting. It's just reminders after reminders to really please respect those guidelines. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
thanks, Paula.
You're welcome.
So the next topic is, it does go with culture. They're all kind of intertwined, but it's communication. And you know what we have found that works really well with a lot of our clients is to kind of mix those up a little bit as well, so that you don't always use the same vehicle, whether it be Zoom, Google Hangouts, Teams, or whatever, but throw in some instant messaging apps where you can do, you know, fun things with emojis, those kinds of things. So somewhat mixing those up a little bit. That allows for a little bit of variety, a little bit of creativity, as opposed to, I think, you know, one of the key phrases from 2020 is going to be, can you hear me? Which I think everybody's heard so many times on Zoom meetings. But the other one is zoomed out. And I know so many people that say I'm zoomed out. So it is a little bit, let's mix this up a little bit. I think that's super important. And the other thing is you need to set some video meeting parameters, I really believe, as far as, you know, if you have a team meeting, I've done some where people come in their favorite rock t-shirt, rock band t-shirt, those kinds of things, or they bring their most outrageous mug. But we also, I think there is an expectation of a certain dress code most of the time. So, you know, you might want to set some of those parameters up, but you can mix those up and make it a little bit fun. The other thing too is video on versus video off. I know it is a problem with some people's internet, but it is really tough to hold a team meeting when one or two people don't have their video on. And I don't mean on this forum, anybody can keep their video off, but in a team meeting, so much of what we are missing is that body language, the facial expression, all that stuff. So and I know people have said it to me, oh, I didn't do my hair, or I mean, I didn't put my makeup on. Well, that's your work day. So try and treat it like that's your work day. I'm not saying everybody, you know, formal attire, and I laugh at myself because, you know, sweatpants and a nice top. Like, it's just, I think that is really what's the attire of our workplace right now. Let employees have some fun with backgrounds. You know, your favorite trip, your your logo of your business, or I've seen so many really interesting ones. And so let people have fun with that and maybe do challenges with backgrounds, those kinds of things. Pets. I mean, my dogs, I try so hard when I'm working from my home office to keep them quiet, but you know, sometimes there's one where, you know, where a dog jumps up on laps or whatever. Dogs in the workplace bring a real comfort to the workplace. So no different, you know, have your bird on your shoulder, whatever floats your boat. I was at a restaurant, just an aside, a couple of weeks ago, and a guy had a boa around his neck. I asked the question, it was his comfort snake. So whatever works for you, you know, it's fun to share those kinds of things. Also, you know, maybe the trials and tribulations of working from home, the work aside, but what's challenging of working from home. I was watching CTV Canada News, I think it was yesterday, and the weather gal, she's quite funny actually, and she had her son, she hoisted him up in his pajamas and said, here he is watching mommy do the weather from home. And, you know, some people might think that's totally unprofessional, but that's the world we're living in today. So, you know, it really was a bit endearing actually. So those kinds of things, share tips about creative spaces at home. If you don't have a big space, how can you be creative in making your home working environment as comfortable and as productive? So some of these communication tips that aren't necessarily about the work can really bring some value. We talked about scheduled daily check-ins, you know, and also I would encourage one-on-one between team members. Some team members, maybe that are living by themselves, are a little bit more needy, and I don't mean that in a bad way, in having that social interaction. So, you know, encourage people, if, you know, it's not just about the team, if it's somebody that you used to always go for coffee with, set up a Teams or whatever and just sit for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, have your coffee and have your chit chat. The one other thing I do want to add is that what, to avoid sometimes costly mistakes, or, even just you haven't been able to get a hold of somebody, it is always good to share some home numbers or cell numbers, whatever works for that individual, for emergencies only, and make sure you keep that for emergencies only. It's just, I've had some clients that haven't heard from a couple of their team members in a couple of days. And it's those kinds of things that, if someone didn't show up to work for a couple of days, you would be concerned. So it's some of those other just natural part of being an ethical and caring employer. So feedback. It's not communication is not a one-way street. So providing feedback is a great way to boost employee productivity and increase the retention rates. So encourage your remote employees, provide feedback, probably more so than if you're in the office. Because like I said, it is really easy just to go, great job on that piece of work, or I had a good comment on, the webinar you presented, whatever that is. Whether positive or negative, just because you're not face to face, we can't let those opportunities for feedback go to waste. It just makes people feel that you're listening, you're there, they're valuable. And we still have to make sure that we consider people's growth in the workplace. I think right now everybody's so focused that this is temporary, but it's been 8 months. So I think it's 8 months. So that's all, that's a good portion of a year. We can't forget about the fact that people need to grow in their careers. There's lots of good ways for recognizing employees. There's, you can do email threads to appreciate good work. There's like high fives, there's emojis, there's gifts, there's lots of different ways that you can recognize good work remotely. Even on these type of forums, I did see a chat, thanks for speaking up for us, those kinds of things. I just, a thumbs up, those kinds of things. Or have a dedicated space. If you have a company intranet or some sort of space where you can just have a dedicated space for recognition or gratitude. There's software. Kudos is a forum. It's it's not necessarily for the small business, but that's just an example. There's platforms out there that's easy to recognize employees for good work, and celebrate and schedule a time to celebrate wins, just like you would if a project came through, finished it. Typically in some organizations, they would get together around the boardroom with a beer or a glass of wine. You can't forget to celebrate those wins, even though they may not be able to be face to face. So for the second breakout, the second and last breakout, I would really encourage you to sort of brainstorm some of these ideas of how you're keeping in touch with your people. Is there, there's got to be a bazillion tools and tricks. I mentioned just the very, very, very few. But if you want to share some of the ways that you are communicating with your folks, that would be great.
We're basically all here, so I'm going to hand it back over to Wendy. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch the poll, because I know some of the breakout rooms I was in, we talked about the fact that people have to bump off at 10 to 1 and then again at 20 after 1, so that they can eat something, go to the bathroom, because I know some of you are Zooming all day long. So I'll hand this back over to Wendy. The poll is going to pop up on your screen. It's 10 questions. They're not hard. I really appreciate you doing them for us. I always feel a little uncomfortable with this part of it, because I know everything is super sticky when it comes to government, but I would like to thank Alberta Labor and Immigration for partnering with us to be able to provide these. And our workforce development officer is on the call. She's multitasking, so I don't know if she's hearing me pump her tires right now, but thank you, Melanie. And so yeah, the poll will come up. Wendy, just work through it.
Okay, no worries.
Knock it off. It's just it's not difficult, and it's anonymous. I just wanted to say that. And the discussion group conversations were fantastic. So I'm going to get out of here so you guys can get to it.
Okay. So just in thinking about the time, quickly from our group, did have a couple things around using technology for reward-based programs where if people got a certain number of comments, they would be entered into a draw, those kinds of things. People still continuing their wind down at the end of the week online, and another one where it was admin professional week, delivering handmade or individual packages and posting that on their YouTube channel, that kind of thing. So we had some great conversation. Or does anybody have anything, really unique or fun or whatever they want to share? I don't want to stop the conversation. I just want to make sure you guys get the benefit of the full webinar, but love to hear any really creative ideas that you want to share, because it is a challenge to come up with some things.
Marjorie had some great comments on the spot, called you out.
In our group, sorry, I had to unmute. In our group, we were kind of talking a little bit about morale and different things to do with your team members to kind of engage everyone. So one of the things I had mentioned was we have Google Chats and Google Hangouts that we use quite often amongst our organization. So we have people in Grand Prairie, Calgary, Nisku, across the board that may not necessarily chat to each other every single day, but that opportunity to have that chat open is there. I don't know about everyone else now, but Google Chat seems to be a thing that people will do quite frequently as opposed to picking up the phone now and calling. So weekly from a department side, we have a meeting as well where we start every meeting with a positive, whether professionally or personal, and then we do our agenda, and then we have a general discussion at the end, just trying to engage people more and carry that on instead of having a very structured, hey, we're still all here, we're all still working through this.
Nice, thank you.
I'll share a note of caution, if you will. My wife, and I won't talk about where she works, but they've created multiple levels of reporting, and one of the measurements that they've created is a program called Clockify, and it's almost like a lawyer's program where they go in and have to account for every 15 minutes of their work time, and it's had a negative effect on morale. So, tools can be both positive but negative as well.
100%, yeah. Thank you. Okay, well, maybe I'll move on, and then if, at the end, if people want to share, that's great too. Just a little bit more on follow-up, like never let a letdown or a misstep pass without learning from it. Those opportunities, you can't get better opportunities for career development, for improvement. Don't let a moment like that go by. And it is so easy in normal work environment, but when you're remote, it's easier. But those are such great learning opportunities. So just, don't let those go by without learning from it. Don't let missed deadlines or meetings go unnoticed. We'll talk about that a little bit later. It often can mean somebody is struggling, disengaged, that sort of thing. And my next point, if you feel someone is disconnected, you need to open that door for discussion. It is your responsibility as an employer to make sure people feel comfortable to discuss when they're struggling. Not that there's a fine line between opening that door and prying, but you need to make sure you're the kind of organization that has that option that people feel that they can really present themselves if they are struggling. And just like I said, it's a two-way street. Make sure you always ask, what do they need from you? What do they need from the team? Do they need anything to make their home office workable? Are you being clear? Is there any accommodations people need? I mean, people had their children home. Some people still do, or looking after vulnerable people through this situation. So always ask what they need from you as well. Monitoring versus trusting, just to quote, faith can move mountains. This is true for almost anything in the world, especially true from your employees. Faith and trust goes a long way to ensuring productivity. And as I've said to a lot of our clients, you will find out if people are not your top performers through situations like this. You will find out the ones that you probably should have dealt with a while ago in one way, shape, or another. So in the work from home, it's more necessary to entrust your employees to get the job done. And trust is really built from your behavior, your communication skills and your management skills. And it's up to you to convey that, and that you do trust your employees. Work's not getting done. There's lots of things that could be causing this. So not to say that that's breaking the trust, but you need to trust that your employees know what they need to do and will get it done. Some companies have really gone like Sean just talked about Clockify, I think it was, where they're actually monitoring their employees' work on their drives, how long they're on their computer. There's an article, Dr. Reed Blackman in Harvard Business Review, and it basically says all of these mechanisms, these highly controlled surveillance software, it threatens to erode the trust between employers and employees. Of course it does. No different than the manager walking around at 8:01 to make sure everybody's at their desk. Like, that's really kind of gone by the wayside, and it should, because it's, you know, in today's generation, a lot of it is about getting the work done, and done well. I'm not just saying getting your job done, but there is expectations and you need to meet those. But being at your desk at 8:01 isn't necessarily going to make or break that piece of your employment. Employees that are subjected to this feel incredibly stressed out, and they're basically afraid to say anything. So it really decreases productivity. Trust is a highly valued principle by all workers, and especially, like we talked about, that next generation. How you handle monitoring your remote employees basically is going to be a determinant of how you attract and retain your people. People want to work for somebody that has faith in them, values them, trusts them. They want to work for you, and they want to do a good job. So really, if you've really done a lot of what we've talked about, monitoring shouldn't be necessary. Trust should be a natural fallout of that. Just a few red flags so that there are, like I said, when I spoke to one of my clients, that one woman, there's people struggling out there. So it's just some warning signs to watch for, because at the beginning, this was all new. People actually kind of thought it was cool, fun, but people are now getting settled into it. And I don't have to, you know, it's everywhere you read, the newspaper, see on TV, the mental health is at a crisis right now. And a lot of it is loneliness, feeling on your own, that sort of thing. So, you know, it's up to the employer to make sure they address the mental health as well as the physical health of having a remote office. So sort of how can you tell if your team is cracking under the stress? Resiliency tests, there's numerous of them out there. Have your group do them. Have your group, it could be you know, something that's done outside of regular talking about the workplace. Have them do a resiliency test. There's a lot of them out there. Mind Tools is an organization that has one. And they say right now, fewer than a quarter of the people have high resilience right now. And it really, that resiliency is really an indication of how well your group will weather this storm. Another warning sign, mistakes. And that's what I talked about, you know, don't let miss deadlines go, that sort of thing, because mistakes can also be a sign that people are starting to burn out. They feel that they're on their own. They don't feel that they have a team behind them. And stress often manifests itself in inaccurate work or missing things or missing deadlines. Basically, I've had some people tell me they don't even know what day of the week it is. So, you know, those kinds of things are warning signs. And that's when you need to have that conversation with that individual and, you know, what do you need from us? Distractedness. If, you know, you are on your regular call, your Teams call, if people do turn their camera off, or if you notice that they're not paying attention, they just don't seem themselves. It's a lot harder to discern this when you're on video conferencing than when you have that person in your office. But distractedness is a big warning sign around somebody might be a little bit struggling a little bit. And as I said, like forgetting things, forgetting attachments to email, those kinds of things. Even their appearance is a really a good indicator sometimes that they're struggling. Language is becoming more negative and emotional. You know, we all say things like, boy, this is going to be a hard deadline or a tight deadline. But when it turns to, I'm never going to do it, or it's impossible, or I can't, there's no possible way, or I'm already exhausted, like watch for those emotional languages that they're speaking and their facial expression. And they talk about the adrenaline rush. Like I said, it was kind of a new thing. Everybody working from home, they got into the routine. You know, I don't know how many people went out and bought puppies, but I guess the animal industry was massive, and you can't get in to see a vet. So, you know, it was kind of a new thing, but it's wearing out now, and people are really, they've come to, and this is another 2020 word, that new normal. Let's hope it's not a new normal, but right now that's how they have to live. So watch for those, that negativity. And, you know, just think to yourself, maybe at weekend or at the end of the week, have you noticed any of those red flags? Give yourself a minute to really think about that with your team. The next phase of remote work, like I said, we're kind of out a while ago out of that honeymoon phase. So be aware of the warning signs, assess your team, and intervene as appropriate. Really ask the question, are you okay? You didn't see yourself today. You know, is it work? So something I can help you with? Can I get a team member involved in a project? Just pay attention to your workers. You'll be far ahead of a majority of leaders if you do this, and you'll have a way better chance of getting through this and weathering the storm. Can't emphasize enough about talking to your employees. Keep those communication channels open. Give the opportunity not only for the team chats and the socializing, but for those one-on-one chats. And if you see something off, open the door to that conversation. It is your responsibility as an employer to try and make sure under OH&S that you have a mentally healthy workplace. And you can't ensure that, but it's that you're trying, and that it's your ethical responsibility. So all I can say is keep your eyes, ears, and your emotions open to your employees, and don't think that next week they'll be better, or next week. Just get on it, I think, is the best advice on that side. I'm going to end up with a couple more stats about the work of the future. Citrix, 7,500 workers across 7 countries, 1,000 of them in Canada. Interesting enough, 49% want to go to the office on certain days or for certain activities. 42% want a more fluid working style between office and home. And I've heard that from almost all our clients, that they've had some of those comments. And similarly, 41% want more flexible working hours that suit their lifestyle and home priorities. And that's what's going to come out of this, because people know it's possible now to work from home. Obviously not in every job, but people that are working from home, they have the technology set up now, and they've seen what more they can get done without commuting, you know, potentially an hour or 2 hours every day. So they are really asking for more flexibility. Is there any questions, or does anybody want to jump in with you know, anything that they chatted about in the breakout sessions that we didn't get to? I'd be happy just to facilitate a conversation, or any questions if you have any.
Before anyone jumps in, I'd like to actually, I think what I learned from this workshop is I'd like to wrap it up here. Wendy and I will stay on the call. You're welcome to hang out, brainstorm, and ask questions. It's 1:22. We respect that you've taken 90 minutes out of your day. I emailed Sean this morning and I said, how ironic that this is the day that our workshop would have been better virtual, because so many people would have had difficulty getting to and from the office with the roads being the way they are in much of Alberta. So you can almost pretend that COVID's not happening and we're doing this anyway. But this was really, I really enjoyed this. I'll ask Wendy if we can make the slides available to you. I'll email them to you.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That was a question I got that I didn't address. So I think this was great. And I'll tell you what I saw is all of the things that we talked about, the sharing ideas and just being able to talk. I mean, I see you managers in particular. I can't even run down the names because there's so many great comments from great people that truly care. So I think if nothing else, like Wendy had great ideas and great insight and statistics, but it was a happy irony that you folks got to brainstorm and collaborate with each other. So I'm going to mute myself. If you have to run, we understand. Thank you so much for coming. We'll see you on the
Thank you,
next
everybody.
one.
Appreciate it.
In the chat, I put the link to the next one. I'll send you all an email with Wendy's slides and the link to the next workshop on November 19th. Don't feel like you have to run away, but if you do have to run, we understand. Thank you very much. And I'm just going to mute myself and hang out with Wendy for a while.